Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Michaela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Michaela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is story time, or the day of our chapter exchange. I'm hoping to get chapters from you from either plot. I'm releasing 2 videos on some Tuesdays to read your writing from your writing prompts, and 2 videos on some Fridays to read your chapters for those of you where I have permission to read on the channel. Basically, your work will be extra videos, but everything else will be the same for my viewers. I will label chapters from Plot 1 as Season 1 and Plot 2 as Season 2. If you're writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, as I have discussed before. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to writewithmichaela@gmail.com. I will post the email address at the end of the video as well. Please do not send Google Docs. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read all the chapters you send to me. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in writing their own stories. I also consider this new story as PG-13. There are vicious dogs, there's soldiers known to burn witches, kind of some violence there. So if you are under 13 years of age, you need parental guidance. Excuse me. This story is in its rough draft stage, just as the last story we heard. I have actually finished it, and I'm doing the first read through, but I've already put in a lot of edits. The title of this story is Tajiia, and today we are reading chapter 3. One viewer wanted to know if he could have something to read along with as I read, so if that's something you would like, then email me and ask me for the chapter. Make sure you are specific about either City of the Ancients or Tajiia and which chapter. I will create a PDF of the chapter. The PDF, once created, won't receive any edits, and it may or may not match exactly what I read on the channel, since I sometimes go off script and ad-lib, but that's what I can offer. Let's start. Chapter 3, Martial Law. When Tajiia awoke, last night seemed like a dream, so she decided to have a normal day. As she fixed her breakfast and tried to eat, she felt a stifling nervousness that filled the air. Tajiia went to the window and peeked out and nearly choked as she saw soldiers with full armor patrolling. It was 3 to 4 days to the castle. How could the messenger have reached there in time for all these soldiers to be here already? One word stuck in her mind: prophecies. Tajiia sighed. She needed to see how bad things were, and plain invisibility probably wasn't enough. She needed to shrink down enough to walk under the door. Being so small didn't allow her to move very quickly, so though she kept the invisibility spell the whole time, she only stayed small near people. When she got to the center of the village, she saw a platform, and in the center of the platform, the soldiers had locked Mr. Dwandles in a pillory. Tajiia looked around some more and saw the village close the shops. Farther down, a woman stepped out on the mat on her stoop. She begged the soldier to let her get milk for her baby. The soldier motioned to a huntsman, who escorted her. The huntsman strictly instructed that she could say nothing extra. The woman shook with fear when she reached the shop. She said in a shaky voice, "Milk, please, 2 pints. The shopkeeper glanced at the huntsman and replied, 2 shivels. They made the exchange with the huntsman, inspecting each item, and then the huntsman escorted the woman back home. Tajiia didn't know what to think, as no one was talking. She saw a dog, and she saw horses. But if the soldiers could talk to their own horses, she decided to try the dog first. She thought, why are all these soldiers here? The dog thought, they want to follow someone into the woods to find this strange area. Tajiia thought, that didn't make any sense. With all the soldiers everywhere, no one could even move out of their house. Tajiia tried a horse. Why are all the soldiers here? One horse thought, someone is using the forbidden magic. The strange area is the proof. Another horse thought, the king fears the prophecies and wants to stop the rebellion before the rebellion grows too big. This was getting her nowhere, so she headed back home. As she neared her home, she spotted her squirrel friend and knew he wanted to think with her. So she thought, what's going on? Turn me small so I can come in your house. Pardon me. Tajiia turned him invisible, and when he got to her, she turned them both small enough to go under the door. Once inside, the squirrel thought to her that her friend was in the woods and he needed to come in. The squirrel thought it was urgent. Tajiia thought, what friend? The squirrel thought, Raceler. Tajiia searched around herself until she found Raceler. She thought to him the plan of invisibility first and then small. Once Raceler was inside, he quietly told her to send him images of her father. She did, and he changed his appearance just before there was a knock on the door. The squirrel darted out of the room to an inner room. Tajiia went to the door and opened it. A soldier stood there, and he filled the whole door frame. I'm told that there was a disturbance on the side of your house last night. Tajiia stared blankly at the soldier. Raceler opened the door a little wider. I'm sorry. My daughter is mostly mute. What did you say? The soldier repeated his statement. Raceler thought with Tajiia, any ideas? I knocked over some tools, but the squirrels covered for me. Raceler answered, I didn't hear anything, but we can check it out. The soldier didn't move away from the doorway. Tajiia didn't want to seem nervous, so she thought of what she could do. The soldier didn't look like he would believe anything. She searched around the house. It seemed that she had knocked over 2 of the 3 tools, so she used her magic to knock the 3rd one over. The soldier immediately looked towards the side of the house. It just so happened that 2 squirrels were playing near the back of the house, and the falling tool spooked them. They took off running around the house. Once they got around the house and entered the village, they ran in a couple circles and then darted to the woods. The soldier watched the squirrels. He hadn't believed the huntsman heard a disturbance from squirrels. He walked around to the side. How are you thinking with me like the animals? Thought Tajiia. Mentor relationship enables me to do it. I doubt you need the relationship to think with me, but just stay calm for now. Things are working in our favor at the moment. The soldier came back around. It was just some tools. You shouldn't leave them in the weather. I'll bring them in, stated Raceler. No, you cannot have them in the house, stated the soldier. Raceler thought, shed? No, thought Tajiia. We don't have a shed, stated Raceler. The soldier looked at Tajiia, and she shook her head. Then he walked away. Raceler closed the door. He thought, it probably isn't safe to talk. Why did you come? I mean, you barely took on my father's face before the knock. The castle is moving lots of soldiers, not just in this village, but in all the villages around these woods, and even some villages not near these woods. Some of our group could not return home. Well, and your squirrel friend entered our special area before morning. We were trying to close it and move it, but then people returned. And your squirrel kept saying, "Soldiers are in the village. Tajiia doesn't have parents." He ran in a circle and repeated that thought along with, "Tajiia doesn't talk to people." So I headed to you to see what the situation was. How old are you? Tajiia thought, I'm 11 and a half. At least the soldier didn't ask about your mother, because then we would have had to lie and say she was visiting a sick relative or something. But they saw your father and then didn't ask. Otherwise, they have taken you to another home until arrangements could be made. I know, thought Tajiia. I think now would be a good time to leave the... What? Thought Tajiia. We can't stay here. The soldier was the last one to see us, so hopefully he won't kill another villager when they can't find us. Tajiia thought, but there are soldiers everywhere. Racer thought, that's why I'm hoping you can turn us both small and or invisible at the same time. At that moment, the squirrel came back in and thought, me too, you can't leave me. Tajiia chuckled to herself. She thought, small and invisible to go under the door, and then just invisible in the woods. But you have to stay close. Now, where are we going? Racer thought, we'll go to the special area first to see if we're needed, and then we'll head to the mountains northeast of here. Tajiia agreed. She didn't think she would be able to return home for a while, so she gathered all her money and some extra clothes. She handed out the leftover biscuits, which they ate. Then she used her magic to make the three of them small and invisible. The squirrel climbed on her shoulder after they walked under the door, and Racer took her hand. He didn't know how far was too far, but at least this way he knew where she was. It took quite a while to walk into the woods since they were so small. It seemed a near eternity before they were normal size again. Racer whispered, how close do I need to be, and how long can you do this spell? We are close enough, replied Tajiia. I can stay invisible most of the night by myself. I don't usually do invisibility for more than a few minutes because the squirrel usually leaves. He doesn't like watching me hunt. In some ways, you will need to be my mentor. No one has done invisibility spells for a century now. Tajiia thought to herself that it was good that she showed the people her growing and shrinking and not the invisibility. After they reached the path, they spotted a few soldiers here and there, but to Tajiia's amazement, the soldiers didn't seem to see the path. When they reached the trees that would light up, they could see soldiers near them, but the trees weren't lighting up for them. Racer thought to her that was because they weren't magic users. He also thought that the trees would light up for the wizards from the castle. While they waited for the soldiers to move on, Tajiia thought the question of what was the difference between a warlock and a wizard. Racer thought that wizards used wands, so the king knew who had magic. But the warlocks didn't have wands, so the king feared them. However, Racer knew several warlocks that used a wand for show. Finally, the soldiers moved on, but Racer didn't want the trunks to stay lit long, so he said they should run down the path. As they entered the tree trunk, Tajiia said, I thought everyone had to be here for this door to open. Emergencies are different, explained Racer. When they arrived in the meeting room, relief showed on Ashwea's face. I need you to lead a group out. How many? Asked Racer. Arthur waited for you, and then at least 10 more. And even though Tajiia didn't take all the available tests last night, I'm sure she is the strongest witch here. So your group can have more. We will go with you, stated Merk as he motioned to his group of 4. A couple of witches aged 20-something came over with their mentors and joined. My book, Tajiia said suddenly. The tree will be entrusted to your care, and your group will be the last to leave, stated Arshwea. Tajiia didn't understand, but she didn't protest. A warlock came up with his 2 students to join. Ah, yes, said Arshwea. This would be a good group for you, because Tajiia doesn't necessarily need a mentor, so we have enough people to cover the students. Again, Tajiia didn't understand, but she didn't protest. They exited the meeting room, and then several groups headed out using different paths. Once all the groups but Tajiia's were gone, Raisler was going to instruct Tajiia on how to bring the tree. But he stopped as she raised her hand up to a globe light. The light floated down to her, and then magic sucked the tree into it, and all around looked like normal woods. Gather close to me, stated Tajiia, and they all did instantly. Tajiia said her invisibility spell over all of them, and just in time. Soldiers rode into the area on galloping horses. The soldiers could sense the group, and they veered away. The soldiers gave each other signals, and then they galloped away just as suddenly as they had galloped near the group. Some in the group thought of how fortunate they had been for the horses not to run over them, but they were too scared to speak or voice that now. Tajiia searched around herself. She could feel no soldiers, but in her mind she saw flashes of soldiers with dogs. She knew the dogs would find them even if they were invisible or if they were small, and she knew that the dogs would not go around them like the horses had. Tajiia didn't know how long it would take for the soldiers to get dogs here, but they needed to be long gone before then. All the groups needed to be out of the woods. Tajiia thought to Raisler, all the groups need to be out of the woods before they come with dogs. Can you think to them to make haste? Raisler thought back. No, I'm not mentor to them all. Let's get moving, and then you can try. Tajiia turned herself visible, pointed northeast. We're going that way. Stay close, and you will stay invisible until I run out of magic, she said, so they would feel that she had more limits than she did. Then she turned herself back invisible and started walking. Soon she felt people pulling her cloak to both sides and to the back. She looked side to side, but couldn't see the invisible people. She shook her head to herself because she wasn't sure the situation was any better than in her village. At least in her village she knew about where the soldiers were, and she certainly didn't like all these people knowing about her magic. At the same time, she didn't know if someone from her village had been in the meeting last night. There had been so many people at the meeting. So Raisler's plan of leaving seemed the best, at least for now, since so many soldiers were now in the village. It was closing in on noon when Tajiia heard the jangle of a bridle. She saw a hollow log and instantly made everyone small and hoped they went in the log with her. While they were in the log, she turned them visible and counted everyone. Including herself, there were 14 and a squirrel. So far, she hadn't lost anyone, not even the squirrel, but the squirrel had been riding on her shoulder. She could see the fear on several faces, and she could feel the fear in the air. In minutes, the jangle of the bridle and the clomping of the hooves were fading in the distance. We're not going to have a log every time, stated Ozzy. Merk bumped her with his elbow. Be grateful. I know we won't, replied Tajiia. She thought of her words and then said, I also know that you can't depend solely on my magic. We will have to use our strength as well. But the thing that concerns me now is smell. Have you ever seen a hunting dog hunt? He sniffs the ground for that certain scent. She looked at Raisler and decided not to say any more. They walked to the other end of the log, and Tajiia peered out. She heard a bird and looked up. She thought to the bird, "Please think with Arshwaya that the soldiers are bringing dogs." The bird took to flight. As they exited the log, they once again turned invisible, and then they returned to normal size. Raisler hoped to be to the plains by mid-afternoon. He knew he would feel better with the mountains in sight, but it would be several days on the open plains before they would see the mountains in the distance. And then it would take more than a week to reach the mountains. However, Raisler didn't think about the open plains so much. He more felt like the woods were closing in on him. Raisler glanced to the side, expecting to see Tajiia, but she was invisible. And that's when he realized one reason that he wasn't worried about the plains. Tajiia knew invisibility spells, and she could teach them. At least she could teach Artur and himself and the other mentors. Arshwaya had 4 people with her, and she couldn't make them invisible or even that small. In fact, she was unaware that Tajiia was using invisibility. When they heard soldiers, they would dive into the nearest bush, bramble, or briars, and she would make them blend in. She was concentrating on keeping them blended in with the bush at the moment, so she didn't hear the bird. One soldier pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted. He walked to the bush next to where they hid and watered the bush. Arshwaya knew she was glad he hadn't picked their bush. Then the soldier mounted and rode off. Arshwaya sighed to herself. She was having so much trouble blending in the extra 4 people that she felt she shouldn't have sent 10 with Tajiia. Then she thought to herself, the 10 didn't count Artur or Raisler. And then the one warlock had 2 students. That would make 14 total if I include Tajiia in my count. As she was thinking through things, the bird thought once more. Tajiia said get out of the woods before the soldiers with dogs arrive. Then the bird flew off. Arshwaya watched the bird go. She thought, we don't really have a way to communicate between groups. Just between queens and between chancellors. I guess it is good Tajiia can talk to the animals. I will have to keep my thoughts open. How many groups do we have? I will have to list them down. Hopefully Carl had time to list everyone. Arshwaya motioned to her group to head out. They all had their ears peeled for soldiers, and all were very nervous without thinking about the dogs. Many knew what the prophecy said about the danger level thickening right after they met the witch of the prophecies. They all thought that Tajiia had to be the one of the prophecies because they couldn't imagine something worse. At mid-afternoon, Tajiia's group came to the edge of the woods. Even though they were invisible, Tajiia instantly made them all small. They stood at the edge of the road as a whole unit of soldiers rode past them. After the soldiers were out of sight, they became normal size and they crossed the road. Once we're farther from the road, I will drop the invisibility spell, stated Tajiia. Does anyone know where our closest water source is? We need to head towards water before mountains. Just head to the mountains and we will find water, replied Raisler. Artur walked along a little while before he said something. Then he said, I didn't catch all the thoughts before, but you wanted to warn Arshwaya's group of something. Did you figure out how to do that? I thought to a bird, replied Tajiia. If Arshwaya listens to the bird, she will get the message. And what was the message? Asked the warlock with 2 students. Tajiia glanced over her shoulder. Once again, she could not see the invisible people, and talking so much wasn't normal to her. She sighed to herself. I got a flash of a picture. I'm not so good about the timing of these pictures, but I saw soldiers with dogs. Dogs? Hunting dogs? Asked Bollock. They will pick up our trail. Varant nudged him. One thing at a time. She wants us to find water next. One of the 20-something witches wanted to say something about the dogs, because the dogs really scared her, but Varant's statement stopped her. Tajiia thought to Raisler, how many groups? How many people total? Artur glanced around. He too could not see the invisible people. We are far enough away that we can speak aloud here. We don't have to think. I mean you no offense, Tajiia. Started Tajiia. I'm not really used to talking to people. Yes, the squirrel mentioned that. So I'll talk, stated Artur. I'm actually thinking I went with the wrong group. I am the strongest. I am one of the strongest warlocks. I'm certainly the oldest living warlock, and I have the most experience. But you don't need me to protect you. Arswea's group is probably fine. Tharkek's group is also probably fine. Arswea's group had 4 plus Arswea. Tharkek's group was the second largest with 6 plus Tharkek. Chancellor Wycarlt had 4 plus himself, just like Arswea. Let me think. Who else had 4 in their groups? What about Chiltor? Asked the warlock with 2 students. Artur glanced towards the voice. He too certainly didn't feel accustomed to being around invisible people. Visor, I think Chiltor only had 3 plus himself. Tajiia wasn't really listening. She had gone back to feeling the breeze and listening to the grasses rustle. Artur, Visor, Raisler, Merc, and Varant continued talking about all the different groups. Counting us, that makes 43 people, stated Ozzy. Is that what you got, Bollock? I got 7 groups, stated Bollock. I got 43 people, said one of the 20-something witches named Telka. I got 7 groups, said the other 20-something witch named Tola. Tajiia, did you get that? Asked Raisler, expecting that she had probably gone back to concentrating on her spell. Huh? Asked Tajiia as she turned around. Geez, this is strange. Usually you see the person who is talking to you. 43 of us are on the run, stated Raisler, and we're divided into 7 groups. Tajiia turned back and continued walking. Are we all headed for the mountains? I believe so, said Raisler. He looked in the direction where he last heard Artur's voice, but he didn't see Artur. However, Artur answered just like he had seen Raisler look at him. That's the safest place, and if the dogs are brought out, it will be best for everyone to head straight there. I know I'm only a student, but, started one of the warlock's students. The message was only given to Arswea, and not the other groups. The warlock Visor scowled at his student for speaking directly to Tajiia, but no one could see his face. I only saw 1 bird, and I only knew 1 group leader name, replied Tajiia. No one said much after that. When Arswea's group came to the edge of the woods, they were much closer to the village, to the north of the woods, than she would have liked. They could see and hear many soldiers. Her group decided to quietly head west before they ventured out on the plains. Before they left the woods, she spotted a bird and thought the message she had received and thought to send it to Tharkek and for him to pass it on. Tharkek's group had run out of bushes, so mentors were responsible for magically raising themselves and their mentee into the nearest tree when they heard horses. Tharkek would raise himself and then blend them in with the tree and make the tree look as though it had more leaves or foliage. At the moment they were in the tree, holding their breaths, one soldier had stopped his horse under the tree and he was looking up. Tharkek's group dared not move. Then the bird landed in the tree near Tharkek, and Tharkek had flinched. Luckily, the soldier had looked away and he was moving on. Tharkek tried to think to the bird that the bird almost gave him away. But the bird thought, Arshwaya has a message to you from Tajiia. Tharkek just sighed and thought, what is the message? The bird thought, dogs will be with the next set of soldiers. Tharkek's heart jumped, and he nearly lost his grip on the branch. The soldier turned back to look for the noise, but the bird flew out of the tree. So the soldier continued on. Tharkek received. Arshwaya wanted the message passed. Tharkek sighed again. After the soldiers were long out of sight, Tharkek told his group that they needed to be out of the woods before nightfall, and if they spotted a bird, to let him know, so he could pass a message. No one dared ask what message, but they knew whatever it was had startled Tharkek. Tharkek once again changed course. With so many soldiers in the woods, they would turn to avoid the soldiers and still try to head out. This time they headed straight north. They walked as quietly as possible. Some students in the group had hoped to get to their village, but with so many soldiers, it didn't seem possible. Tharkek tried to think of all the groups. He knew the Chancellor had a group, and of course Arshwaya had a group, but he didn't need to notify her because she sent the message. Apparently, Raisler had reached Tajiia and brought her back to help, and the message had originated from Tajiia. He wondered how many people were in Tajiia's group. He knew Arshwaya was getting desperate for people to lead groups out. He also wondered where Artur was. Artur would be with whomever had the tree, but they would need him to fight the dogs. Tharkek decided that he couldn't think about the dogs. The witch, wizard, and warlock community had dwindled down so much that they had combined their meetings, and usually they didn't fight. They only hid, but they would have to fight the dogs. Artur was the oldest and would remember the fights and battles that occurred before their numbers were so low. Tharkek saw a red bird and thought to it. The bird then left and headed towards Chancellor Wykarl's group. Then Tharkek saw a bluebird and thought the message to it. That bird headed towards Chelter. Tharkek glanced around his group. I will need 2 more birds, I believe, and can someone help me with the names of the group leaders? Raisler should be leading the group, said a witch. I believe his group started the message chain, stated Tharkek. And then Arshwaya was next, and we were third. And you sent to Chancellor Wykarl and Chelter, asked a warlock. Yes, replied Tharkek. That would leave Cessny and Wagler, said another witch. I don't think Wagler is leading, stated the warlock, but he should be in the last group. I can never remember that warlock's name that's leading his group. They continued walking, and Tharkek kept a lookout for the birds as well as soldiers. When the Chancellor received the message, he shook with fright. He counseled with the witch and warlock with him. All 3 knew they had to get out of the woods before the dogs came, and they had to be a long way away. But their progress was very slow, with having to hide from soldiers at least twice an hour. And that needs an edit, because he has a student in his group, I think. So the student just listened to them. His fear was mounting. The other groups took the news about the same. Arshwaya spotted a tree ahead and thought they should climb it and sleep there. So as the sun descended, they headed for the lone tree out on the plains. Tajiia stopped and turned back. Raisler accidentally walked into her, but caught her by the shoulders, so they didn't go tumbling. He told the group to wait a moment before continuing. Tajiia scanned around. She felt it odd that she didn't feel the soldiers. Would the soldiers not pursue them at night? Would the soldiers abandon the woods and stay to the paths at night? She didn't know. But she felt they could lay down in the grass and the soldiers would not see them from the road. If she could sleep a while, she could turn them invisible in the morning. At least she wanted it to seem that way to the people. Everyone jumped when they could see the others in the group. And then they looked down and saw themselves. Then everyone instantly looked around for soldiers. Tajiia just found a place to lie down, and she lay down without saying anything to anyone. Once everyone realized it was time to sleep, they too laid down and tried to sleep, while Tajiia, and no soldiers around, gave them the opportunity. Artur was one of the last ones to lay down. He wanted to ask Tajiia what spells she had in place or said over the camp. But then he saw the squirrel curl up with her. He sighed and thought, maybe Tajiia needed more than one mentor. Raisler was often in the mountains and not out, so he might not think to teach Tajiia certain things. Moreover, the spell for the mentor match had done some bizarre things last night, almost like it was choosing one person and then another. Finally, it settled on Raisler. Arthur decided he could do the spells tonight. Yes, Tajiia needed to learn them, but she had worked spells all day and needed some rest. Okay, writers, that is chapter 3. Leave a comment below on if you would have left your home with Raisler to go back to the tree. Or leave a comment on how you would have felt if you had been in the center of the woods when the soldiers were riding in. Would you have been grateful for the invisibility, or would you have been too scared? Things have really picked up in this chapter. Now, everyone is on the run, or everyone that we know that's in the story. So far, the antagonists put more huntsmen in the village, and then armed soldiers in the village. The protagonist group did find Tajiia, but then some of them didn't make it home. Now they are on the run. We also know that Tajiia has a lot to offer because Raisler said that no one has done invisibility in a century, but it will have to be enough to protect all the different groups. That was a question. Will it be enough to protect all the different groups in the woods when the soldiers bring the dogs? So that's a question. She's got power. She can do invisibility. Is that going to help them with the dogs? I don't think so. We'll have to see what she comes up with. Join me Tuesday for some more jargon or writing prompt or something about personality or relationships. If you have an idea of what I should do, leave that in the comments. Join me Friday for chapter 4, On the Run. In between days, you can visit my website at www.bymckella.com and read my character bios. I know I need to add more from the City of the Ancients, so I'm working on everything I can. Feel free to finish your story 1 for plot 1 before you start plot 2. You don't want to have everything going like I have right now. Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. It's fun stuff. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and the bell so we can continue to write together. Send your latest chapter as PDF or Word document to writewithmckella@gmail.com because I'm really looking forward to reading your stories. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mckella with Write with Mckella. Bye for now.